Hi, today we're here talking with Jesus Patino. I've known Jesus for a while. We happened to run into each other at my niece's wedding few weeks ago in Chicago, and we were talking, and I was talking about this project at Job Guppy, and he seemed interested, and he started explaining to me a little about what he does, and he was interested on doing an interview with me. Usually, my protocol is I like to, hear what somebody does, and I like to find out what I can find out about that job title. What I realized with based on my conversation with Jesus was I don't know if I could come up with what his official title was. I know kind of what he did, but I couldn't put it into one sentence. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jesus and let him go ahead and talk about how he would describe what he does in his job title, and just kind of roll on into what he does on a daily basis, and how that goes. So Jesus, thanks for joining us. I'll let you go from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Happy to be here. So what do I do? I am a business transformation consultant. Work for a small firm called Airmill Solutions, which essentially provides resources for companies to solve different types of problems, right? Anywhere from commercial and legal issues, right, to things related to business structure, business planning, is strategic planning, down to very tactical type of issues, right? How to solve inventory management problems, uh, all the way up to how to develop, a sales and business development plan for a foreign country. Um, so for the last several months, I've been working with a small firm small company in Houston, Texas, medium-sized company, I would say, family-owned business, right? That was very interested in developing its business abroad and come up with a 5-year plan to identify growth opportunities and start executing on that. So I help them in that takes me, sometimes to the shop to talk to the shop guys to working with new products, right? Or to somewhere in South America, trying to do sales and visits to companies using that have the need for the types of products that the company
Okay,
does.
so it is international.
It is becoming international. It has been
Okay.
mostly focused in the U.S., right? But the company, when we identified that there's a big opportunity abroad, and we're chasing it right now. We're
Okay.
defining the
So
teams,
it
defining the structures, and
yeah. So
helping navigate all the.
a better way of saying it is it can be international. Your position, your role, the function you're doing, it can be international. May not always be, but it can be at times.
Yes, it can be international, and I would say that my background and my profile, my career, right, has that aspect and I try to leverage where I go. So I was born in Mexico. Did I mean they started my career there? Had a chemical engineering degree and did a number of years working offshore, going out to offshore rigs and working with drilling fluids, being a mud engineer, which is a specific position within the drilling process that takes care of the fluids that are used to make holes to find oil and gas. And then after that, I had the opportunity to go overseas and worked for a couple of years, also in offshore operations in West Africa. Uh, and then after that, I moved to Houston to pursue my master's in business, my MBA. Did a full time MBA here in Houston, 2 fantastic years, and what I would say life changing years for that grad school. And after that, I went back to oilfield services until a couple of years ago when I started doing this initiative for, consulting services, and it's a little bit of a mix of consulting and it also has its entrepreneurial aspect.
So it's if you had to put, is it associated with any particular industry?
Most of my career has been in the oil and gas industry, right? In that obviously, I mean, a lot of your network and your contacts and your experiences are related to oil and gas industries. What I've found over the years is that people in every industry, they always love to say that their industry, how unique their industry and their problems are, right? Uh, I don't think that's the case. I think when you start looking at organizations, right, regardless of which business or which trade you operate in, the problems are very similar. In the objectives are similar. They can be they come down to uh, to managing cash flow and to generating value, creating value, and they are and all organizations are about people. So it's yeah, people and a specific set of objectives. So it's yes, I do have a experience that is very focused in oil and gas, but right now I am not doing anything related to oil and gas whatsoever. Right, it's main services for the most part.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't to say that you're in the oil and gas industry, but it was leveraging, like connections, networking. I don't know. Do you even is there any even overlap from the knowledge from the everything you did in the petroleum and oil industry to this job, or is you switch kind of like it's a 180, not a 180, but like it's a there's you can draw a line in it, and there's not a lot of overlap. You're a consultant now. Your whole focus of what you do is more of a different mindset, skill set.
Right, you could argue that it's a parallel path, right? I mean, there are a lot of specific things that are, yeah, certainly specific to oil and gas that are not applicable here, right? But I mean, an example, I spend a lot of my time today, thinking through sales life cycle, right? Generating contacts, developing relationships, following up, right? Calling people, generating the opportunity, and closing out on sales, right? It doesn't matter if you're selling uh, cars or if you're selling large subsea projects, right? Ultimately, the processes are similar. The the uh, the behaviors of the people involved in both sides of the relationships are also similar. So when you if you're able to understand and navigate those processes, right, you can apply those skill sets to
And
different.
that's what I'm trying to get to is like to pull out, and I don't quite have maybe the words. I'm like maybe to pull it out the way it's in my mind right now, but it is like what is that common, like you said, it could be anything you're selling. So you have this mindset, what you're doing, and we'll get into later maybe job search ideas, and like what would somebody do, because now it sounds like it could be very large. So it's not like somebody's chasing an industry here. They like this kind of work. They like breaking things down at this level. It's not that they may care some what industry they're associated with. They might find some funner than others, but um, they just like this kind of work in general. It's more about that than it is about what industry they might be like kind of going after. So it is back to kind of that. Was there any one word you would put on, like business consultant? Is that
Yeah, well, I mean, we call it business transformation consulting, right? We're looking at, okay, what can we do? How can we leverage digital tools, right? The tools available these days are super powerful. How do companies leverage those, right, to make and and when you think about what what are those tools enabling, those tools are enabling access to data, right? Uh, the the ability to turn that data into information, I think, is a critical one. Uh, is one that requires training, but that one that can really be really powerful, right, in helping companies achieve objectives, right?
do you have? So let's break down. Like, let's focus on Airmill. Is that
Mm-hmm.
the name?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's focus on Airmill. Let's forget about all the other consulting type jobs you could in industries. Let's focus on like if just what you do at Airmill, the products you work with, or the type of customers you work with, or the projects might be a better way of saying it. Like how do you engage with people right up front? Do they come to you when they're in trouble? Do they come to you when they're starting companies? What kind of projects are you working on? Is it a lot of people interaction or minimal? A lot of behind the scenes work. Are you hand holding? Or what's a life cycle like? I guess that might be a good way to break it down. What would be the life cycle of a project like?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, right? And that has happened I mean, for the last couple of years, right? Is that one relationship with one customer has different aspects and different angles, right? Um, a lot of times I used to think that like or to see when I came out of business school, right, in going into oil field services companies, I sort of realized that very large companies, when one could think that are very sophisticated in their processes and the way they make decisions, right, are not so much, right, and they are very empirical in the way they people act, and they are not very not nearly as I say as sophisticated as one would think, right? And the ability to add sophistication to business is a skill that is valuable, it's powerful, and you can add that sophistication in many different aspects of conducting business, right?
No, that's a great way to put it. That's yeah, I like the way you phrase that. The skill to just bring sophistication to that business, to a business. That's a good way of putting it.
And it's not and it sounds, I mean, you put it out of context, could sound arrogant, it could sound like pretentious, right? But it's ultimately about eh, trying to solve complexity.
Yeah, you're trying to make them look good, and you may not get all the credit for it, but the better they look, the more sophisticated you make them, the more profitable they are, the better, the more efficient that their project is.
The less waste that you the company is generated, right, and therefore the more value that can be captured, right? So what it has, right, it has, as I said, aspects. I mean, for procurement, right, the whole practice of purchasing stuff, right, managing inventories, right, what are the proper inventory levels, right, to manage working capital, and if you manage working capital properly, you release value by releasing cash that can be used for different activities, right? But then you start looking at all different business functions, right? You move all the way up to the front end of the revenue cycle, right? And that there's also the need for structuring, for get that word, right? Sophistication in that sales front. So I spent had the benefit to have a customers that have given me the opportunity to get involved in multiple different aspects of it. And I have a background that also has I've been exposed to the different functions, business functions, um, so I can help in those different things, right? Part of this exercise that you and I having here is identifying, okay, what are those things and how's career evolved, right, for someone. And that if when I reflect on my career, I think one of the best things that has happened to me is having had the opportunity to have different roles with organizations, right? I mean, coming off of school, right? You go into I did chemical engineering, but if you come out of electrical engineering, most kids that are undergoing the electrical engineering program, they think that they're going to be designing chips whole lives, right? And yes, there may be some of that, right? Yes, some of them could go into that, but the skill set that you acquire when you're going electrical engineering can be leveraged in many different aspects of doing business, right?
So right before we go back to the college days, circle around one more time, and I guess part of what you're doing with people, you do have a job where you interact with people. So this isn't something where you get to quietly as an introvert sit in the background and be at a computer all day. You're in front of people. You're standing up giving presentations?
I do a lot. So I mean I do a lot of analysis, internal analysis, right, to show to expose like waste, right, things like
And you do the
planning that
analysis, like it's
I
you're studying it. You're
I
not
do it
just
because I am just to I just enjoy it too much to be up. It's one of those things that I'm guilty of, right?
I'm looking for those skill set. Like, what skill sets make you successful that you feel make you successful at this job? Like, so somebody listening could say, "I have those skill sets, and I like what I hear about this job." Like that, I might be interested in
I
something
think I
like
have
that.
a very strong analytical background, right? The ability to process data, right? I ran a data science team of data scientists developing solutions for the maritime industry in a previous role, right? But the reason why I was given that opportunity is because I have strong I understand what it takes to analyze data and how it's data analyzed, right? Part of that is formal training, right? Checking your your statistics and and data analysis classes in undergrad or graduate school, right? But also part of that is actually doing it in the real world and putting together slides, and that's a skill that I put together a lot, right? But but when you look at analyzing data, right, it's really not about getting the right answer, although you should try to get the right answer, right? It's really about being able to tell the story that the numbers are.
Okay. So turning what you find, and I can relate to that because that's something my job I like to try to do is I'm an electrical engineer. I do a lot of debugging. I may go through days of stuff where but then how do I turn that into a story, a short sentence that I can relate to somebody else that hasn't sit there with me for 5 days and been down all those roads? So, I call that storytelling. Like, how do you take that information, get it out of your head without overburdening the person you're telling it to? How do you translate it into something that they can easily absorb? So that would be another skill set on top of just researching and looking at data, which is a skill set by itself. Turning that into a story that translates to everybody, a picture of what you're
Yeah,
doing. That's good.
finding the right answer in the data is not helpful if you cannot empower people to actually to change
Yeah.
behaviors or make decisions or change the direction, right? I think,
And then
that's right.
what
This
about
sounds a little bit of a
what
cliche,
about
but
leadership? You've empowered people, you've given them information. Do you find that you have to get involved a lot in leadership and steering, or do you kind of hand it over at that point? It's up to the person you're working with.
well, at least I engage at a level of leadership in the organizations that where yes, you have an influence and you have, if not a direct, power directly to ask people to do things, right? You establish the mechanism of accountability to do that, right? So a lot of, and I guess what you're asking is if the role involves herding a lot of cats. Yes, every job involves calling people and asking, following up, and establishing those accountability.
I find accountability a subtle way of saying leadership without saying I'm the lead role or I'm telling you what to do. Establishing accountability is a very subtle way to say, here, the ball's in your court. There's some expectations. We agree on these, and like then let them be accountable, and hopefully that leads them, and that herds the cats too.
Right. Yeah. I one thing that I found. Back in the company I work for. They were big on writing project charters, right? And writing the charter and who are the members of the team, what is the purpose, and what are the limits, right? And what is it time bound, and all the different things that we would have spent a lot of times writing a charter. And it's kind of sometimes that's kind of annoying. Why do we need to do this, right? But it turns out that documenting agreements is a very effective way to get things done. Uh, uh, yeah, when you're able to bring that structure to other places, to places that don't have that structure, that's a very efficient
So
way.
I would call that another. If you want to be successful, you don't have to be successful, but if you do want this kind of job and you actually want to be successful and well known for what you do, like that would be another good skill set. Is kind of how do you move things from that analytical stage, tell the story to somebody, and then empower them, and then turn around and like now help them get to where they need to be, that the goals they set. And so
As a consultant, you're ultimately measured against those results, right? Against your ability
yeah,
to deliver, to make that organization, act on and implement those changes that you're
yeah,
identifying
you
and
have some skin
suggesting.
in the game for
So yeah,
sure.
absolutely. That's kind of the that's the only way that you can bring your value, right? And the reason why organizations use consultants is because people have day jobs and people have in doing these things. They're stepping back in reframing problems, right, and proposals and suggesting, roadmaps to change things is time consuming, is hard work, and really requires expertise.
To me, I feel like you've covered a good bit of what you do. If I was trying to describe kind of what your daily life was like, how much time you spend behind a computer in front of people, even on the road, You know, I think there we probably have a good scope of all of that. Um, so going back to the college days, I guess if you could kind of talk about um, your, you don't have to like go through the whole path unless you'd like to talk about every job you've had. That's fine, but trying to connect dots of where you're at now in this role, and doing that storytelling for somebody back in school who's kind of wondering what they could be doing or they like what they hear. Like you were chemical engineering. Like maybe somebody's in chemical engineering and they're kind of undecided about where to go with it. This might be sounds like a lot of different majors could look into this. What would be kind of how you did it? What was your approach to doing this?
So yes, I mean, I am an engineer that doesn't do a lot of engineering these days. So I came off school and struggled the first couple of years to find graduating in Mexico, and yeah, I thought I wanted to have a career in the food industry. Uh, Things were the economy wasn't doing good, struggle, and I just had a call one day from a friend of a friend that told me, hey, there's going to be this drilling fluids school that is going to happen in a couple of months. If you want to join, you can. And sure enough, I went in and took. I mean, actually, they sent me to Houston, Texas, from Mexico to do a 9 week drilling fluids school. Uh, it went great, and came back and started working offshore, and just going to rigs, 2 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, um, and just starting, you know, I mean, a different path from what I originally thought I wanted to take. Would work out. Money was good. Had free time. There were a lot of good things that came with that, right? Also, its downsides, right? You have to be out there, right? 2 3 weeks at a time, and we had a girlfriend, and you don't have a lot of time to spend with your girlfriend when you're offshore, and all of those things that. So I did that in either for a few years. Then I started going. I and I was off. Was offered the opportunity to go and work overseas, and I went to Africa. Spent a couple of years doing the same thing. Right. In the meantime, I obviously I got married. I had a baby girl, and after a while, I mean, the job was great. The money was good. There was a career there, right? You could there are people that choose to live, that lifestyle for years, being 4 weeks off, 4 weeks on, and or just staying in that industry and job style, right? Or becoming a project manager and just continuing that path. Um, I remember that I was in I was in an offshore rig in Ghana, and it was like a Sunday 2 a.m. in the morning. Um, so the night I was working the night shift, right, and we stopped operations because we got to the target that we wanted to, right, and the next step was to either continue drilling, right, or pulling out the hole of the pipeline, 2,000 meters of pipe, right, which was going to take 24 hours, right, to run a different set of toolings to run some measurements, right. It was a, I don't know, $2.5 3 million decision, right, just in rig time, and we were 4 hours in the rig in Ghana, waiting for the call from Dallas, Texas, to decide whether or not to continue. What was the next operation, right? And I couldn't help but thinking about, there was some guy crunching numbers in Dallas, Texas, late on a Sunday evening, right, to make a decision worth millions of dollars for a bunch of guys to work, just do something offshore, right? And I kind of, I mean, I saw myself, standing in the rig floor, and it was like, hey, I can continue doing this, being this. What I do here is important, right? I mean, you're in a very important industry for the economy. You're creating value. This is good work. This is great, right? But I am not part of the decision. The decision has been taken by somebody else that is not here, that clearly has a different skill set from mine, and he's looking at other things that I just don't have visibility of. And that's why that's what made me go to business school and apply
Oh, that's neat
in
to hear
getting
the
an MBA.
catalyst of, like what made that. There was a switch. I mean, I probably might not have asked that question, but for you, there was a switch of a moment you can remember where a kind of a, I won't even call it a light bulb, just a switch in your way of thinking that kind of led to some of that. And I'll do a quick side plug here for another podcast I did, where what you're describing about the operations manager and the guy in Dallas crunching the numbers. I do have another podcast with a geologist in the petroleum industry who does the operations manager, and he talks about a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of neat to hear you describing it, and I'm like, oh, I actually like kind of know what he's talking about. Like,
I actually saw that podcast that you mentioned, and I enjoyed it. So it's highly recommended. Uh, uh, but yeah, so what I realized is that there are a lot of considerations that go into making business decisions, right? There's a lot more than the technical, right? In every industry, right? There's a lot. I mean, for the most part, the engineers, makes things happen, procure, design, and make them, enable things, right? But there are marketing considerations. There's political risk, geopolitical risk considerations. There are a lot of different things that come into play when making a business decision, right? For investing, for deploying capital, right? Or for developing or exiting specific markets, right? Um, and that was kind of the thing that I realized, and I found that that getting an MBA was the best way of getting exposure to those aspects of the
okay, so
professional
that was
development, right?
probably the more directly related educational uh, connection to what you're doing now was the MBA.
Yes, arguably yes, because that's where I got my marketing courses and my corporate finance. I didn't have a formal financial education, right? That's where I learned accounting. That's where I got strategy, classes, right? Which us engineers love to say that those are soft skills, right? Those are the easy based classes and the things that. Uh, uh, but when you think about it, those are the classes that that make people able to to communicate well, to improve their communication skills, to tell stories, right, and to eh, to understand complexity, right? In that complexity that is not easily written down or summarized into a model, right? Which
Yeah,
is
kind
what
of kind of gives
engineers.
you that sophistication to bring sophistication to other things. Like you have some skills, but you don't know how to what direction to point them. Um, you know, you're trying to figure things out that other people have already figured out. Like how to maximize, how to be efficient. That's kind of what the MBA is doing for your skill set. And then you're so
It's also nuance, right? In math, in engineering, there's no room for nuance, right? Uh, uh, there are things that can work. I mean, you cannot design a circuit that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work, right?
like yeah, you're not going to be able to move it or make it work without moving it or the drill. Waiting on the decision from Dallas. If it's in the wrong spot, it's in the wrong spot, and it's not going to work out. Like you can't change that. And it's a mindset, and that is something I want people that listen to these things to get out of some of these is maybe they rule some of these things out because they're just like I don't have that mindset or I don't feel like dealing with it even if I did. Maybe I like the data science part of it, but I don't want to go talk to people all the time and or I like the engineering but I don't want to do the marketing side of it. Like so that's important. What I want is people to hear this stuff and the ones that are checking boxes off said wow that sounds like me, that sounds like me, that sounds like me, like this might be a career field I like to go explore. And then the other ones are checking boxes off and but maybe they're putting X's like not me, not me, not me. I might not even finish the interview, I'm going on to the next one. Like that's okay, but that's the point of it. It's not to get you to finish, it's to help someone decide this is interesting or hey I've heard from this person and that didn't sound like I might need to reconsider where I was going with this. Like that's a good outcome for me of getting this out in front of people. So like I like hearing the way you're describing it and the skill sets and the nuances you're talking about. even though it is a math thing. Like there's still a nuance and a need to know that you can do that and work through it and stick with it. And when I'm getting into all those things of my job, just the aspects that come into play and personalities of for what I do. But I get what you're saying, and I hope the listeners get that too about this role. Move forward a little bit, and I have a few generic questions that I like to always sprinkle in. But uh, is there anything like that might surprise people to know about you and your job, or something that's like you feel is a little different in who you are in your job compared to most of the other people that are in this kind of job that you maybe work with, their peers? Or I mean, is there anything that kind of comes out, or like a surprise of, I didn't know it was going to be like this when I started. I was really surprised to learn that, whatever that might be. It's okay if there's not, but if there is, sometimes some interesting things come out with that question.
So well, the thing is I guess that is different from a in my experience is that, I mean, when you think about consulting in general, right? I'm ultimately, I mean, I am a consultant, right? When you think about consultant, there are very well established tracks for consulting, right? If you come of college to join a consulting firm, right? One of the big consulting firms, the Deloittes of the world, the KPMGs, the McKinseys, right? That do strategic management and business consulting, right? They have there are specific points in your career, right, where you can access to those paths, right, to join those type of firms, right? And if you don't go there, like schools, right, they, I mean, these firms, they recruit from specific schools, right, a year before graduation, right, because they want to have the cohort coming up, right when they finish college, right, and they groom them and expose them to a lot of different things, and they have a very very well defined path and career path within those organizations, right? And the same happens at the grad school level. When you come out of business school, there are specific points where you can enter those careers. And if you try to get, for a different path, it's going to be very hard, right? Nowadays, I am doing consulting, right? And I am just happening to be, doing very similar jobs and perhaps not having access to the same customer base, because those this is definitely different customer base. But what I have found is that there is a very 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 large need of expertise, definitely beyond with the big companies and the large the big marquee names uh, that one tends to think of. So yeah, I think it's I mean in consulting there's a there's a lot of different things. The need for sophistication is everywhere.
And so a few things I keyed in on there is, and that kind of goes in with some of my, like, so I might put it, you can, rephrase it for me if you like, but I might put it that, one thing that's a little unique about you and your role is you didn't come up through those paths of where you were starting there. That's one of my questions is, do you have to start in a certain area to get this role? And what I'm hearing is, no, you don't. You could start off somewhere else, and yeah, you might have had to be a little more intentional than some other people who just work their way up through it, like to kind of make that switch at some point. But you found a way, like, so that it is possible. Because some jobs it's just a hard no, like it's not going to work. There are roles like that where it's just not going to happen. Some are obvious, like a doctor. Some are a little more, like the petroleum engineer. He said it's pretty much a master's degree. The geologist. I mean, there wasn't like, I even asked him, like, are there other ways to do it? And he was like, unless you know somebody who owns a small company and lets you come work, like, it's probably not going to happen. But in this role, you got to think about how you might do it or make a career shift if somebody was listening that's already down the road of a career. But there's ways to do it. Go try it. It's not there's an opportunity there. You just have to be willing to put yourself out there. And another thing was about the credentials in your role of, like, did you need the MBA, or, like, if you didn't come from a business school, like, are there ways around it? Like your work, what you were doing, maybe a little analytical in the petroleum industry, or, then you got your MBA and like all of that to kind of married well together to kind of like help open the door for you.
I haven't encountered that
So it's up to the individual, really. What I'm hearing is up to the individual to look for something, seek something out they like, make a pitch for it. Don't tell themselves no, I don't have the credentials. Let the company tell them no. Like, but they don't. Nobody needs to say I don't. Other than personality traits like we talked about earlier or skill sets you might have. Like, but there's no credential basis that says I'm going to stop because I don't have the credentials. Like, it's wide open.
It's really wide open. It's a lot more about your personal brand
Yeah.
and about your networks and about what other people say about you.
Do you have these kind of go together? Any like or dislikes that you'd like to reference here that you'd want to forewarn people about that are really great or maybe really negative about what you do? And that goes a little bit along with work-life balance. Like how is that for your, this kind of role?
I always tell people that I have a theory of the sexy job, right? Uh, uh, it,
I'm curious. I'm
in my theory of the sexy job is that if you ask somebody what they do for a living, right, they will tell you about the sexy parts of the job only, right? Uh, if you talk about a civil engineer, right? They design big things, right? Big bridges or big I don't know mega big infrastructure works, right? If you ask a an investment banker, right, what they do for a living, right, is that they go into roadshows with CEOs and they fly the private jet, right, to do sales pitches and to do mega mergers, right? The reality is that neither the engineer designing the big bridge, right, or the investment banker, flying, spend the majority of their time doing that. They spend the majority of the time either crunching numbers, right, or putting together slides, right, or hearing cats, or waiting for something to happen. It's every job is very sexy, in making copies, right, chasing people, or waiting for a phone call, or and, and I do think that having a happy professional life, right, requires you to identify what are the things that really excite you about your job and try to maximize those, right? In knowing that it's probably not going to be 50% of your time spent doing that. It's probably going to be a lot less. But even then, it could be, I mean, exciting enough, right, for you to devote your time and your professional life to it, right? Um, that's kind of that's one thing. I remember speaking with a very good friend of mine who went on and did years ago, right, and worked for a big consulting firm in 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 Massachusetts. And he would tell me, I mean, yes, I have a great job, a great title, but I do slides, and I have to put together 300 slides for my boss's boss to pick two, just those two, right? So it's very unsexy.
So the sexy part you talked about was like earlier in the interview when you were talking about these great skill sets and how like the mindset and the mentality and the sophistication that you bring to it. And the unsexy part is you spent a lot of time in front of a computer putting PowerPoint slides together or crunching numbers that was unsexy. That for that one sexy moment you did have of sophistication.
Exactly, a lot of hours. I mean, yeah, you have to roll up the sleeves, right, into some things that are not
No, that's
as
fine. That's
fun
what this
as
is
one
about.
could
Is like,
as one could think, right?
yeah,
That's
this is why I want people that are in the field, in the role, working every day, saying these are the things they do. And it's no, I'm not up giving presentations and flipping whiteboards over and telling somebody to hit the button for the next slide. Like, well, I get to hold my coffee and talk and
exactly.
look cool. Like,
I was responsible for a data scientist team, right? As I said earlier, right? I had in the team there were a couple of remember PhDs, right, data scientists, right, and they were building optimization models, right. So if you ask them what they do, they were building optimization models, right, to save millions and millions of dollars, right, to eliminate waste from the
sounds
maritime
great.
industry. But the reality is that they spent 9 hours a day debugging their software, right, and trying to find the lines of code that they were not, right, and trying to compile and trying to integrate data sets, right, doing data cleanup, just running your ETLs, and that's not that comes with building. And yes, you're building the model, but building that optimization model implies doing a lot of things that are not as sexy or fun as one could think.
Okay. Everything's fair game here. Like it's all, that's what we're looking for. The truth here, like the transparency, the realistic, transparent, not the paragraph you Google, like not the company saying, come work for us. Like, here's what you get to do at our job. It's like we'll find plenty of that stuff, but it's like, what is it really like? And so that's why I like doing it this way. Work-life balance. I mean, how do you?
It's very good these days.
Okay.
I get to, but sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
But
previous
it's
roles
not
along
like
the
it's
way,
always that way. You're not stressed out all the time. You're not, like
I I'm in a very good place, work-life
good.
balance wise right now. But I've had roles that implied being away from. I mean, when I did work offshore, right? I
Mhm.
was out while my daughter was born.
I guess that's a good way of looking at this that I hadn't thought of when I say work-life balance. There's also what is your past experience and perspective? What is good for you?
What it took to
So
exactly.
traveling once a month for you may be great when you used to have to be out for 4 weeks at a time, and somebody else is like, you know that's a lot of travel. Like, so yeah, I guess I do have to make sure there's some context around that. But at any rate, you're not griping about it, and it seems like you're pretty happy, and you got time to sit here and talk with me today. Thank you for that.
No,
So
absolutely, super happy to.
um,
I had to cancel like 10 meetings to be here. That's great.
that's great.
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, hopefully you don't submit a bill for the consulting time here.
No, that's no way. That's not gonna happen. It's all good. This is super nice, super fun.
Okay. So I do like to bring up income. I leave this wide open to specifics or just industry related. However you would like to discuss it, your comfortable level. Like your lifestyles and things. So like a job role like yours, and we'll just keep it. Uh, I mean, I know it can range, right? Because there's so many different industries that pay probably different levels, and there's geographical locations. Play cost of living plays up into all of this. Like, but I would let you maybe just in your own words talk about it. And
It varies, right? And you have and it all depends on what model you want to work on, right? So um, and if you step back, coming off, with an engineering degree, right? In the US, it's probably going to put you, upward, what, 5 figure salary, right? I don't know, 60, 70, $80,000 a year. That's what we expect. And you should progress from that, right? Getting a graduate degree in an MBA, right, from a well-regarded school, right, is should make a difference, right? It should make it, lower six-figure salary easily. And it's public information, right? You have the average salaries coming off of school. I mean, you have professional salaries, right? And that's into these big companies, right? Coming out as a consultant, right? You take on a lot of risk. Of You essentially are exposed to utilization risk if you're on your own, right? If you are or with a small firm like we are, so we essentially depend on our ability to generate customers and to generate, right? In that rate that we have, right? Whether it's a short-term rate, right, an hourly rate, or a kind of a retainer type of agreement, has to account for that risk that you're taking on, right? So the part of what I enjoy about this function that I have today is that you have access to opportunities with a lot of upside, right? Opportunities like developing new markets, like developing, right? And you have the freedom to negotiate, different mechanisms, compensation mechanisms above and beyond your consulting fees and your consulting, right? So the way I see it, right, is that you need to establish a good baseline for income, right? And then identify what are those opportunities and negotiate and be forthcoming about how you want to have exposure to that upside, right?
so that actually plays in negotiation, plays back into that. If you're not wanting to negotiate, you might end up You could do a good baseline, but you're not getting your full potential out of it.
And a lot of that is also being in negotiating. It also implies being able to articulate your value proposition as an individual. Like what are the things that you're bringing to the table? Why is your hour worth this much money, right? And not right. What makes you, special, right? Or how you're creating that value for the organization.
Similar about income, but not income. The job search, how to job search, what names to look for, titles, stuff like that.
The big consulting firms are I mean, McKinsey, right? Deloitte, right? BCG. Those are big, very well established firms with hundreds of thousands of consultants uh, around the world. And it's very hard to, it's very competitive, right? They have competitive processes, they have interviews that are, excruciating and long, and people prepare for those, right? Most of the times, those type of jobs are, those people recruit from very specific schools, in, and they are open about what are those schools, right? Um, I There are a lot of smaller firms, right? But you think about consulting, and if you go in, Indeed and those type of places to look for consulting jobs, yeah, a lot of times you have implementation consultants, right? Which are the type of roles that it's people that help companies implement a specific type of software, right? A CRM or an ERP or that. That's yes, it's consulting, but I would be careful about making the distinction between an implementation consultant, right, and for marketing consultant, right. Because most of what I do is through I mean, it's relationship based and through my own network, right. Yeah, and what I would think I mean, if you want to go to doing this type of things that we've been talking about, right, I really think that you should be trying to get a lot of exposure. I mean, if you go into big company, right? And within the company, leverage opportunities of learning different things, of being exposed to different roles, right? I really think that that's a path that gives you a lot of chances to get into these things, right? Whether you're doing it externally or you end up doing it like as externally like I do, or within a company, right?
And there's a few roles I'm starting to realize as I talk to different job roles. There's some career fields where that's actually highly recommended. Um, like to move around, petroleum industry, consulting, where it's like, why don't you try a few things and learn a few things, get exposure, then you hone in on something. And then there's other fields where it's like do what you want to do the first 5 years, but then you need to have an age where you lock into something and don't change after that because it's not going to be easy to change. Um, so it's interesting to see kind of a little bit of a different approach and things falling into two different buckets there.
Having the analytical background, the chemical engineering degree gives you validation to go in and do offshore work, right? But then having done offshore work internationally gives you validation to do to understand when you look at a commercial role within a company, right? You know how to put together what goes into making something happen out there, right? And those are critical. You need to know those things to be successful in bids and proposals, right? Which is something that I spend time doing, right? And then having, I mean, exposure to marketing and having exposure to commercial work, and those having that visibility and ability to understand the business from different angles, from the different functions, it's one thing that has worked in my case.
So, kind of the wrap up questions, get more into the advice section. So, one of the questions, is there anything you would have done different?
Sometimes you probably should think about taking on, I mean, making changes faster than you think, right? Like I had a role that was 3 or 4 years too long, right? It's hard to make those calls, right? Because when you have a stable job and you have I mean, status quo is always something hard to challenge, right? And you have a family and you have financial commitments and you have um, so, but sometimes it's if you wait too long, right, you miss out on other opportunities uh, that are good. So yeah, I mean, it's like thinking too analytical about making changes sometimes is not the best way, right? But if I think if I flip your question and say, okay, what would I recommend people to do?
So that was the next one. One was what would you do different? And so literally the final question on the interview list is, do you have any inspiring words for the next Jesus who's starting their career journey?
Well, I would tell young guys to be willing to take on risks, uh, to travel as much as they can, as early as they can, um, to 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 learn different things and be exposed to try different foods, to try different, because all those things come handy when you're trying when in your career at some point or the other, right? And you I tell my kids that life is really about putting stuff in your backpack in case you need it in the future. In those first few years of your professional lives are powerful. You get experiences that define who you will become. So yeah, I think what I would tell kids is that if you be a little bit daring, right? Not not irresponsible, right? Not be daring, right? And also I think it's important to find a few things to commit to, whether that's the partner or an objective. But I mean having commitment early on is something that I have seen, uh, working very well for people.
I like that. That kind of actually aligns with a little bit of my philosophies and stuff, but this is your advice section. So, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or we'll wrap it up with that?
Thank you. I'm happy. I'm excited about part of this initiative, this effort. I mean, I'm super happy to share more thoughts, and if anybody ever has questions or something, I'm really happy to. Hope this helps somebody. And
I do too.